Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so today we're going to be sifting through what has been a pretty chaotic local news cycle to see if we can uncover the underlying macro trends that are really shaping our daily lives right now. It is so easy to get completely lost in the relentless stream of headlines, but when we take a step back, a fascinating narrative emerges about our shared challenges and the rapid changes happening all around us. Let's dive right in.
Here is our roadmap for today. We've structured things thematically into 5 distinct areas. We'll quickly move through public health and safety, commuter chaos and hazards, economic strain in tech, cross-border travel shifts, and finally, culture and community quirks.
Starting with Section 1, Public Health and Safety, Navigating Outbreaks.
So I did have a bit of a sinking feeling. That was the literal first reaction from BC's top doctor, Dr. Bonnie Henry, upon hearing the news of a deadly Hantavirus outbreak on a cruise ship off the Canary Islands. Right now, 4 Canadians who were evacuated from that exact ship are currently isolating in Victoria on Vancouver Island. This group includes a couple in their 70s from the Yukon, a passenger from Vancouver Island, and a 4th person originally from BC. Now, they are totally symptom-free at the moment, but they're staring down an isolation period of at least 21 days, which could potentially stretch all the way up to 42 days. So you can absolutely understand why Dr. Henry described an unwelcome sense of déjà vu.
But hey, before we hit the panic button, we really need to compare hantavirus directly to COVID-19. Yes, hantavirus is extremely serious. It's fatal in about 30% of cases, and tragically 3 lives were actually lost on that cruise ship. But look at the transmissibility here. It is not highly transmissible like airborne COVID-19. Hantavirus typically spreads through exposure to rat feces, and very rarely through human-to-human contact. So the absolute crucial takeaway is that this is not a disease with pandemic potential. The isolation is a strict, necessary precaution, for sure, but this is a highly localized, contained situation.
Shifting gears now to a deeply tragic public safety issue, we need to talk about the devastating double homicide in Surrey. 2 teenagers, just 16 and 18 years old, were shot and killed in the underground parkade of a housing complex. Investigators do believe this was targeted and linked to the ongoing BC gang conflict. But honestly, what makes this so incredibly heartbreaking is the human element. This violence unfolded mere steps from family homes. Neighbors and young children literally witnessed the aftermath of the gunfire. And if that wasn't enough, this happened just hours after another shooting at a nearby gas station. It's a very sobering reality check on the community impact of organized crime happening right on our doorsteps.
Section 2. Commuter chaos and hazards. Extreme road behavior.
181 kilometers an hour. Just wrap your head around that for a second. That is how fast Mounties in North Vancouver clocked a vehicle flying through an 80 zone on Highway 1. And who was behind the wheel? A 23-year-old novice driver. Now, not only did this driver initially try to take off and speed down the highway in the opposite direction before finally getting stopped, but they weren't even the owner of the vehicle. The result of all this? A $701 fine and an impounded BMW. It's a stark, scary reminder of the sheer recklessness that law enforcement is dealing with out on our highways. Now, this next one brilliantly illustrates how chaotic intersections can be, though in a much more baffling way. Over in Delta, a crash happened that was so bizarre, people initially thought the footage had to be AI-generated. Here's what went down. A sedan makes a left turn. Then, a motorcycle enters the frame already popped up on one wheel. The rider slams the brakes, collides with the car, and then, in what's being called a perfect storm in geometry, the bike literally launches into the air and gets caught dangling right on top of the traffic light. Miraculously, the rider is expected to survive. But wow, it just highlights how incredibly dangerous intersections are, with major risks coming at you from multiple angles at all times.
Moving on to Section 3, Economic Strain and Tech, Wallets and AI.
So tell me, how are you actually coping with the cost of living crisis right now? Are you finding yourself quietly cutting back on your summer plans, or maybe actively hunting for deals at the grocery store? Well, if you are feeling that intense financial pressure, a recent survey proves you are definitively not alone. According to a new survey by Harrison Partners, an absolutely overwhelming 90% of Canadians have changed how they manage their money in just the past 6 months because of shifting economic conditions. I mean, 90%? That is a massive demographic shift in consumer behavior. But here's the most jarring takeaway for me. A huge majority stated that this financial change felt entirely out of their control. People are feeling dictated by the economy right now, not empowered by it. And all of this anxiety builds into real-world, everyday sacrifices. We aren't just talking about skipping a fancy vacation here.
Nearly half of people are cutting back on their overall spending, and 1 in 5 are delaying major purchases. But it gets so much more granular and difficult than that. People are struggling with absolute bare essentials, like food and gas. They are having to dip into their savings and lean way heavier on credit. Most shockingly, some folks are even delaying out-of-the-way medical appointments simply because they cannot afford the gas to get there. It paints a very clear, very sobering picture of a community under severe financial strain.
But juxtaposed directly against all of that everyday economic anxiety is this booming tech sector, which really offers a glimpse into a much more lucrative future. One of the world's biggest tech conferences, the Web Summit, is happening right now in Vancouver, drawing in over 20,000 attendees. Canada's AI minister is actually there, emphasizing a supercritical concept called digital sovereignty. Now, what does that mean? It's not about building a wall or a quote-unquote digital moat. It simply means having options and control, ensuring we aren't relying entirely on other countries, like American closed-source models or free Chinese open-source models, for the AI tools that are basically going to run our future.
And the government is putting some serious capital behind this concept too. Ottawa just announced a massive injection of over $17 million into the BC tech sector, spread across 8 local businesses. For example, $3 million of that is going straight to Human in Motion Robotics, which is a local company creating these incredible advanced wearable robotic systems for mobility impairments. This recent push brings total federal investments in BC tech companies to nearly $400 million since 2021. So it's wild to think about, right? While everyday consumers are tightening their belts to survive the week, the institutional race to stay globally competitive in tech and AI is absolutely accelerating.
Section 4. Cross-border travel shifts. Shifting travel trends.
So, all this economic strain and shifting global relations, it's dramatically altering how we travel across the border. When researchers at the University of Toronto analyzed Canadian cell phone data in the US, they found a massive 42% median decline in travel over a 2-year period. And this isn't just tourists deciding to do staycations in Canada to save a buck, though that is definitely happening. A huge chunk of this is actually a loss of trade-related travel, specifically linked to trade war tensions in sectors like the auto industry. A lot of that cross-border business is just being done over Zoom now. However, the data does show a tiny, very slight 1.4% uptick recently in April. It's actually the first overall increase since December of last year. So the ice might be thawing just a little bit, but we are still way, way down from historical norms.
And finally, Section 5. Culture and community quirks. Community joy.
Okay, let's take a well-deserved breather from the heavy news, because nothing illustrates our community's joy quite like the saga of Gunnar the mannequin over in Nanaimo. About a decade ago, a local guy named Brian fixed up this broken mannequin he found at a garage sale and just put it on his fence. It became this beloved, hilarious neighborhood fixture. Then a month ago, tragedy struck. Gunnar was stolen in the middle of the night. The community was completely crushed. Kids literally thought passing police sirens were out looking for him. Brian actually offered a $100 reward, which incredibly led a stranger to spot Gunnar nearly 3 hours away. So Brian drives out, rescues him, secures him back home on the fence, and then decides to step things up a notch. Thanks to a local hairdresser, Gunnar now has a beautifully made-over mannequin girlfriend named Geely. I mean, it's ridiculous, it's hilarious, and the owners just want to keep making people smile.
All right, we have covered a ton of ground today. From the contained but serious health scares and the absolute tragedy of gang violence, to the mind-bending geometry of a flying motorcycle. We've looked at the crushing realities of the cost of living crisis, right alongside the hundreds of millions of dollars being poured into our digital sovereignty and AI future. And of course, the epic rescue of a beloved fence mannequin. It leaves me with this final question for you. When you take a step back and look at these macro trends, what do you think is the true defining story of our daily lives right now? Is it this massive technological boom, the severe economic squeeze, or just our weird, resilient community spirit finding joy in the little things? Let that marinate for a bit. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep your curiosity sharp.